Welcome to another exciting episode of the Contractor Business Builder podcast. We have the honor of hosting Tyler Campbell. He's the CEO of FieldProof. So Tyler's not just a contact leader, he's a sixth generation builder, pretty impressive, who's lived every level of the construction game from detailing 120 plus Wawa gas stations to helping international contact startups actually succeed in the US market. Tyler's on a mission to fix the broken relationship between tech and construction pros. So anybody you try and use, tech that's been designed for different industries knows the pain of it. Even ones that are designed for construction can often lead you astray. So we dive into user experiences, field tested strategy, and the biggest contact companies. What the biggest contact companies are getting wrong. So welcome here today, Tyler. How you doing?
I appreciate it, Derek. I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Right on. So six generations in construction, that's quite impressive. And definitely got a heritage and lineage of construction running through your veins. Can you tell us a little bit about, your background and how things kind of evolved into what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I started in the family business with my dad and my brother back in 2012. Family business is structural detailing. So 3D modeling was kind of at the core of how we get that done. So I would model structures in 3D all day, every day. And I did that for a decade. And
Yeah.
so when you're doing that, you get to see a lot of drawings from the architects and from the engineers. And you get to communicate with a lot of different project teams every single day.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a proving ground for me. It had made me realize things that could work, but also things that are completely broken about construction as a whole. A lot of times it's people that cause the problems. It's not the technology. So I always come back to people. But it was a great place to learn about the industry. And of course, I was able to be, mentored by my dad and my brother. And, being multi-generational in the construction industry is through no fault or no fault of my own. It's kind of cool, I tried to not go into the industry at one point in my life, but then, fell into it because I needed a job and started with my dad. And man, I just kind of fell in love with it from there. I
Yeah.
love intricate problems that we get to solve. And it's super challenging, but it's super rewarding. And yeah, that's kind of the fun thing that you mentioned there with the Wawas. So yeah, you guys are welcome for the sandwiches down there in Florida. That's one of the longest running repeat projects that we did among a lot of other ones that we did. So I think the most Wawas I detailed in a single day was four Wawas. So I can measure my productivity in Wawa stores.
Yeah. Yeah, construction, a little bit of acquired taste, I guess sometimes. It's not for the faint of heart. And I know I've been there too, where there's so much happening, you can get frustrated, but at the end of the
It's
day, it's
harsh.
a pretty
It's
special industry for many reasons. But yeah, not for the faint of heart whatsoever. So, construction, it's difficult, it's messy, it's everything, in between. Technology's there to kind of solve the problem, make our lives easier, but often there's a big disconnect. Can you speak to that of what do you feel are some of the disconnects or things that tech companies can get wrong when trying to implement or push new products to the construction industry?
I think a lot of times it's assumption. It's assuming what people need versus doing proper exploration and discovery. I've started to learn more about this over time, which is, and I'll go back to a product book called The Mom Test that I recently chewed through, and it kind of like it really articulated this. It's, if you bring an idea to your mom and you say, "Hey, mom, I was thinking about doing this. What do you think?" What's she going to say? She's going to say, "Oh, that's a great idea, sweetie. Good job." Pat you on the head and send you on your way. The real test is to go in and ask questions of, "Hey, mom, how do you do that? Why do you do that? How often do you do?" Like all of these sorts of questions can help you have a better understanding of the core why behind any sort of product. And I think most of the time what ends up happening is you can get founders, you can get product teams, and it can be a mixture. I mean, I know I've done it too. You can kind of get blind to what you're building and thinking it's the best thing ever and ask leading questions. The best thing that you can do while you're building a product is to keep an open mind and just continue to just ask why. Why do you do it that way? Tell me how you're currently doing it and trying to collect all of those data points. Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to build is a product that people actually find use in, because that's going to be the most sticky thing that you can do. And it's going to be the most helpful. But you're not going to be able to just understand a need of a user just by one conversation, right? You have to have multiple conversations with them. You really need to dig into those pain points. And so for me, I think often it's just assumption that gets construction technology in trouble. They assume that they know how it's supposed to work, or they make assumptions on a flow of how information gets passed, and they don't necessarily ask, or they might have asked, they just didn't ask in the right way. And so it's really intricate. It's really difficult. I have a lot of empathy for people that are building products, more so now than I ever have, because I get it. It's really tough. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, my mission, I'll say, stepping back actually, it's, my mission is to, be human centric in our design and human centered and our solutions, right? So we want to make sure that any product or anything that we're supporting comes out to the field, and the people in the field, the end user, whether it's in the field or in the office on a construction site, they look at it and they go, oh my gosh, finally, they get it. They
Yeah.
understand. Because what that does is that causes those products to grow. The word of mouth will start to spread, right? If you can really understand the problems that your users are facing, ask raw questions that, you know, you leave your assumptions at the door and you just
Yeah.
try to gain better understanding. So I don't know if that answers your question completely, but it's
Yeah.
assumption, right?
Definitely, very insightful and really can be like is useful and necessary pretty much with anybody who's providing a service or a product. Like whoever knows the client best wins at the end of the day is what
Yes.
something I like to say as far as if you really understand your client and what they need and how they use your product or service and their hopes, their dreams or aspirations, and then also actually what their behaviors are at the end of the day, because it's easy kind of to answer some questions sometimes, but what do they actually do instead of what they say they will do as well. So
Yeah.
what you said about asking the right questions, but also what's the underlying behaviors, I guess, like, or the underlying things that are driving their behaviors to use things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'll add to that because we're like right on this path, which
Yeah.
is often you'll see early startups, even later stage startups, they'll go after a really broad swath of a market.
Mhm.
So you'll ask them, who do you help, right? Who is this
Yeah.
for? And they'll say small to medium businesses in the construction industry. That
Mhm.
doesn't answer my question. All right.
Mhm.
Now, if you tell me this is for electrical contractors that are $5 to $10 million, okay, that are doing
Mhm.
commercial work and they are based in the Southeast.
Yeah.
What you're telling me is you know your dang clients really well, and you know how they're extracting value from the service or tool that you provide to them. And
Mhm.
frankly, I'm guilty of this. I missed this in my first business. I tried to serve too many things. I tried to serve the construction industry. It's not niche
Yeah.
enough.
Mhm.
What you need to do, along with not having assumptions, is to identify where this product is best served to be and start there, right? Go back to Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. What is your beachhead? What is the core focus and the main area that you're going to drive value? Because from there, you can start to conquer other things, right? You can start to spread. But
Yeah.
often you see early stage startups get into this pickle where they start to serve too many people.
Mhm.
Or they're still fighting for their identity. So I get it. I understand, especially if you're still learning the industry, trying to figure out the ins and outs of it, that can be really tough. And so, selfishly speaking, coming as an advisor and saying, okay, have you considered this specific niche, this specific type of company? Because I think they would probably find some value about this. Let's go ask them some more. Let's go conduct
Mhm.
some more discovery around this and let's verify. That tends to be the case with, companies that are entering the US. It's a different
Mhm.
dynamic too, right? So if you're coming from Europe over to the States, concrete companies in Europe versus concrete companies in the US are going to operate very differently. And it's typically because of some of the regulation that is in place, right? Your safety measures that are in place, just what you call things. You could be up north where there's a lot more union here in the States. In the US, you might have a lot more unions versus
Mhm.
in the South, it's maybe not as much. And
Yeah.
so I feel like too, it's if you're coming from overseas into the States, you can make assumptions and you could have a great product overseas and like be killing it over there, but you can enter the US market and not have a
Mhm.
roadmap. And then you end up suffering as a result of that too. So It all
Yep.
comes back to who is the core person that we are going to serve first, and then out of who is the next person and the next person. And it's just continually discovering and
Hmm.
making sure that you're refining that product to serve those people as best as you can. But you can't do that by having such a wide view
Hmm.
of the industry. You can't just say, "Oh yeah, we're GCs of all shapes and sizes." No, nope, 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 nope. Like that
Hmm.
tends to be a warning sign for me when a client comes to me and says, "Hey, yeah, we're for these people," and they're pretty staunchly like, "No, we're for GCs, of any shape and size." I'm like, "No, you're not, bud. No, you're not."
Hmm.
Because you've got a
Yes.
lot of other competitors out there that are fighting
Hmm.
for each chunk of the marketplace. You got to figure out who you're serving and how you serve them, and what their ROI is on their investment with you. I don't know. A lot of times that's just overlooked.
For sure. And yeah, common mistake, if you will, of especially newer contractors or newer companies. Done that myself, where it's a refining process. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe at first you're a little bit unsure, but really one of your first jobs or roles, if you're building a new product or service, is like getting rid of like everybody who's not a good fit for it until
Yeah.
you kind of find that nugget of gold of like specific person, subset of the industry, location,
Yeah.
size of business and where they're going with the business. Like there's a lot of dynamics there for sure.
Yeah.
And it's not that you are potentially like only going to serve that specific person. Like ideally you would, but you're always going to get these like outliers and stuff like that.
You are.
But if you don't have that specific, like that clarity, everything else suffers essentially, product market fit, the marketing, the sales, everything gets easier essentially when you have a good, strong niche and understand it for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Waste
It's
a lot less time and money.
it's scary, isn't it? Like when you niche down like that, it's
Mhm.
scary because you almost feel like, oh man, I'm limiting. I'm
Yeah.
limiting who I can talk to. You're really
Hmm.
not. Like you said, there are outliers
Yeah.
that you can still build relationships with and
Hmm.
serve.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like you have to like marketing works best when you are speaking to a specific individual, right? It has to be very
Hmm.
personal.
Yeah.
And you can only do that unless you're like a HubSpot or like one of these massive companies that can like,
Hmm.
make content for every single segment of their audience and push it out
Yeah.
using ads and like get it completely direct. That is possible. But when you're a
Hmm.
young startup and you're a one, two person company, nobody
Hmm.
has time for that or the monetary resources to go out and do that. So you're best served to just
Yeah.
focus on the one. And it's nerve wracking because you're like, what if I get it wrong? Oh no. But man, like it's made such a difference for me. And it's hilarious too. I had to go through this like anybody does in entrepreneurship and figuring this out for myself.
Yeah.
And man, when it finally was said and it dawned on me, it was one of those, facepalm moments. I was like, oh my gosh, how have I
Yeah.
missed this? It made so much sense. But then I went to the point where I was like, okay, now I'm going to execute it. And there was a sense of like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Did I
Hmm.
pick wisely?
Yeah.
And so I can empathize with it. You don't necessarily want it feels counterintuitive.
Hmm.
Fish in a smaller pond,
Yeah.
but it also makes a ton of sense when you start to think about it as well. So I see a lot of people get that jumbled, and
Yeah.
there are a lot of venture capital advisors out there. So if you've got investment versus bootstrapping, with bootstrapping, it's a lot easier to just say we're going after this market, we're doing this because it's
Yeah.
just you, right? You
Hmm.
either live or you die
Yeah.
by that
Hmm.
decision. With VC, a lot of times they'll pour money in and they want to see a broader market fit, right? So they do want you to
Hmm.
go out and get those general contractors, those subcontractors at large, those SMBs into your ecosystem. It's not a bad thing. It's you can't start there. You
Hmm.
have to start somewhere. And if you start everywhere, you're going to be confused and you're going to be looking around. You're going to burn a lot of time trying to solve problems for everybody when you could just be
Hmm.
solving problems for the few. And that will get you the momentum to get to everybody over time.
Interesting you said that you'd be confused, but your customer, your client is also confused, right? If you're too broad, and at the end of the day, you confuse, you lose as far as clients go. If they don't know what you stand for, or what you do, or who why they should care, then yeah, they're gonna bounce for sure. So we've talked about finding that market fit and the ideal client and all of that. How about where like the rubber meets the road and actually like testing the service or the product or the user experience of whatever someone is selling? How does that come into play for a new kind of tech company?
Well, I mean, for a new tech company, right, you're going to be building out first and foremost probably your MVP, right? Which is going to be like the worst it's ever going to be.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Hopefully. What you need to do at that point is you do need to take it out to the field or take it to the people that are going to be using it and try your best to sit down with them and have them do one of the processes. And okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to watch you add a project, we'll say, or tag a team member in this, or add a team member, bring them to the project. However, your product is structured. I'm using more of like a software example. Maybe
Mhm.
for a hardware example, it's okay, I want you to turn this thing on.
Yeah.
Tell me how you're going to turn it on. And you're just doing observation, right? This is user experience research. This is your UX. We're going to sit down and we're going to watch them do this. We're going to record it and we are going to map out all the different areas that they found pain, where they messed up. I say where they messed up, where they expected something to happen and it didn't happen, right? They don't mess
Yeah.
up. They tell you what they want through their
Hmm.
actions. And a lot of times they're trained on pre-existing things, right? Our phones interact consistently. Like we're used to our phones interacting in a certain way, right? So same thing, like, okay, let's say I take, my iPad here and then I go out and I have a new tablet that I'm implementing into this new robotic total station over here. But this tablet is using a different operating system and a different application that we've coded into it. In my mind, I'm used to using my iPad. I'm not used to using an Android or
Hmm.
a Windows or whatever that is.
Yep.
And so we all have these little biases and we all have these little things that we're used to. And so you have to watch those as people interact with them and try to course correct and say, well, how can we make this easier? How might we make this easier on that end user? Why does it matter? It matters because if they're frustrated, they'll tell their friends. And
Hmm.
so you have to be very proactive at the beginning to say, we're actively trying to make this better. Show them that it's getting better. Because if they see that it's improving over time, they're just going to become more champions for you, right? You're building champions for your product. If you just hand it to them and say, deal with it, and nothing changes,
Hmm.
and it doesn't make their lives easier, it's just more of a pain to use it. Or let's say there's a difference between the person that purchases the software, and the person that is then handed the software to use, right? The person
Hmm.
that purchases it, a lot of times will be like, oh, yeah, fine with the warts. It's not perfect, but it works, right? The user, the person that is maybe the employee of the person that purchased the software, is going to be
Yep.
like, dude, what is this? This
Hmm.
slows me down, right? And so
Yeah.
we've got to go through that chain and say, like, all right, here's our purchase, our person who made that purchase, our decision maker. Let's go down another level. And who's the person that's just the user of it, who needs to log on and do a certain thing? There's so many intricacies in products. And I think often those can get overlooked, or we can become biased to our own thing and think that the research is done, right? Oh, we've done a lot. Maybe you have done that. You've
Yeah.
done that for years. Great. But what have you become callous to and accepted? So at that point, it helps to have a third party come in and evaluate it and say, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Because they don't care. They have no emotional attachment to it. So it's an iterative process. You always have to be doing this. And a lot of times people will just, they'll launch their MVP. They might make a few tweaks based off of client feedback, but it's not really anything structured. It's more of a, hey, Bill, how's it going? Oh, that stinks. Okay, I'll make a note of it. Instead of a longer conversation, which is, Bill, can you walk me through how you do that? Because
Mhm.
it's that discovery process that really leads to making the product better, not necessarily a, hey, can you add
Mhm.
this button here? Okay,
Yeah. Mhm.
I hear you, but we got to dig in deeper and understand why you need that button there.
Mhm.
Because there might be a thing that I can do downstream here to make that happen easy without you
Mhm.
having a button. Can we make it happen automatically? No button pushes whatsoever. We can
Mhm.
only understand that stuff if we're asking the questions and we're coming back into that discovery mode where, we're turning over all the rocks and we're looking underneath and saying, what's there? We will glaze over UX a lot of times. There are some companies I'll say that do this really, really well and they're very intentional with it. And then others that a lot of times they're younger. They may not have the resources for it too. So it's kind of a it's a dance, but you have to continually, if you can't hire somebody to come in and help you do this, you need to become a student of user experience and conducting research and asking good product questions that aren't leading
Yeah.
so that you can
Mhm.
enhance your product overall.
Yeah, experience and expectations are so key, for sure. And if you can't set the good expectations, or people are making their own expectations, and then the user experience is not there, again, it's just going to be a bad fit, and it's not going to go anywhere. All necessarily boiling down to the client at the end of the day, right? That
Yeah.
knowing what they want and how they use it and their behaviors. So I can attribute this kind of to, like, we build out systems and processes for companies, and definitely had this happen where I build something, I think it's fantastic, right? And then
Yeah.
you actually start to implement it and realize, oh, well, no, people don't use it that way, or they don't like, it makes sense for you, right? But when you actually have to provide this to people that don't have your experience or don't have your viewpoint on things,
Yeah.
or just natural tendencies, like you said, because they're used to something else, it can easily go awry, and realizing that you need to pivot really quickly. Maybe not pivot, but like implement and switch things up to facilitate clients, and be able to build something that is useful for them and used by them. Make it easy, right? Because if it's not easy, at the end of the day, they're not going to use it. So can you tell us a bit about product leadership, and what that means in the contact world, and how you kind of guide the product roadmaps without bloating, them with features? I know I've used software where it's like, as you mentioned, they've got, 100 different buttons for me to click around, or different, things to open up, and it just gets real complicated real fast. Can you about that?
So I'll pick on a client and he'll be okay with this. I'm not going to call him out by name or anything, but over the time he has been getting phone calls similar to what I kind of expressed earlier, which is, "Hey Bob, how's it going? Oh, you need a button there? Okay, sounds good." And then that button gets put in. Real product leadership is less about just saying yes to every single thing that the client wants or asks for, and having a more holistic picture, right? Having a more strategic picture. It's taking that step back and saying, yes, but why? And is there a better way for us to get that same result to that person without them having to do any steps? That would be even better, right? Like, how can
Yeah.
we automate this to where they don't have to do anything at all, or they don't even have to set it up? You can only do that by, taking that time to really dig in deep and understand the pain. And so real product leadership is not just saying yes to every feature. It is culling through and saying, what are the top features? What are the top things that we can do right now to add the most impact?
Mhm.
And why this matters, especially like who I help with, like that specific, they're coming over to the US, right? Over in their market, things operate a certain way. But here in the
Mhm.
US, it might be completely different. And so we can't have that same approach on both ends, both sides of the pond here,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Because everybody in the UK market says they need this button. And then everybody in the US market says they need this button. And they're two different
Mhm.
buttons and they do
Yeah.
kind of the same thing. So that product leadership is taking both sides of the pond, so to speak, into account. The
Yeah.
users, once you get to that stage where you are servicing more
Mhm.
types and mixtures of people, that's where it starts to get even more complex. You can see
Yeah.
that within large companies like, Procore. Like they've got entire teams dedicated to just focusing in on what enhancements can we make to this product so that it makes the
Mhm.
maximum impact for the most number of people. And when you're young in the game, it can often get overlooked, and you can just be the yes man or yes woman saying yes
Mhm.
to every single feature request. So real product leadership,
Yeah.
coming back to, great,
Mhm.
why is that important to you? And at the end of the day, I think most of the time I'll see softwares that, get launched. And I'm sure you've seen this too. You kind of expressed that before, which is like you hand it off to somebody, you built this really cool thing. You thought it would be an amazing idea. Like you were
Yeah.
sold out on it. And then you hand it over to the person that was your end user and they go, yeah, yeah, but why? Right. So we
Mhm.
got to start. I mean, we're going back to Simon Sinek, we got to start with why. We got to understand what is the purpose of this thing. And is there a better way that we can solve it with pre-existing tools? Can we do this with a Monday.com versus having to build a bespoke system to do this one task or a QuickBase or a this, that, and the other? And so a lot of times challenging people on, is that really necessary? Like, is it really
Mhm.
necessary? And you'll get to the bottom of things just by challenging people and asking why. And
Mhm.
not in a mean way, but in a kind, like, I just want to understand
Yeah.
way. So
Mhm.
real product leadership just continually asks why. It continually talks to the clients. It continues to talk to people outside of their client base, and it takes user experience into account. And it's very hard. and it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to get to the bottom of everything. It's a lot of recording calls and reviewing calls and, better understanding what people are saying and seeing all the different trends and data points within. That's why if you're a CEO and you're the one doing it, it's not something that you should do long term because it is so challenging to keep up with
Yeah.
all of it. You need some help. It doesn't mean that you can't make decisions, but you need somebody to be in the weeds there to help you
Hmm.
understand here is what people are expressing, and here is why we should look at prioritizing these things. And here's why we should spend money here, not here.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps you kind of understand the product leadership
Yeah.
side more. It's just refining what we're putting on our roadmap. And yeah, I mean, the roadmap comes from those discovery conversations. We have to
Mhm.
figure out what it is that people want, and then we need to start mapping that out and saying, all right, here's how we're going to get there.
Yeah, for sure. That as you mentioned, that process of taking the complex and making it simple and deciding, prioritizing where are we going to focus, what are we going to do. I've seen some software that's really good at this, where construction industry is very complex and there's lots of different types of GCs and builders and all this stuff, and it becomes very easy to kind of like we want to include everybody, so we add like all these features and all this stuff, and it just kind of becomes a mess. Whereas another software where you can see they're very intentional about, yes, it might be nice to have this, but really it's only going to serve maybe 10% of our client base. So to keep the other 90% happy or keep things streamlined, we're not going to include this, and being intentional with those kind of decisions as well, that
Yeah.
just having the Swiss Army knife of, whatever isn't always what you need when when you need to, maybe cut some wire or something. You're not going to be using the,
Yeah.
everything under the sun. So yeah, as far as text awash with buzzwords and myths and things like this. Any that you're tired of hearing of, or
How much time you have? I think the main one that has been on my list for years is game changer. Is game changing. That is really just kind of irritating because 99.9999% of the time it's really not a game changer for many people. Most of the time that's marketing hype.
yeah,
So game
I'm
changer.
guilty.
That's final answer. That's the one.
Yeah. For sure. No, I can appreciate that for sure. I know I've probably got a YouTube video or two that's got game changer on it,
I'm
but
sure we all do.
yeah, for sure overused, and yeah, so true. There's really few things that are complete game changer, in the full sense of the word. I
Rarely.
definitely. So it's been a recurring theme here, but starting like, can you maybe talk about a situation or a client where they've started to build this solution, what have you, but didn't really understand maybe the problem, or weren't like maybe once they got into it, they realized that they weren't, like they didn't have the right problem, or that they were unsure about what the problem actually was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I've done some exploration with some very, very young, like seed level startups that are still trying to figure out what their product is even before they build it. I guess that would be more classified as like pre-seed. And so I know I was working with these guys, golly, probably at the beginning of the year. We were doing some interviews with some superintendents and at mechanical, electrical, and plumbing companies. And it was interesting because these guys came in with their assumptions and thinking that they had it nailed. Like, this is what we're gonna build and it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
And watching those superintendents give the feedback, it
Hmm.
completely obliterate any of the ideas that they had floating around there. It's kind of fun to watch, just kind of, I guess it's a little bit sadistic on my end, but it is kind of fun to watch, these superintendents crush dreams. But, it was as simple as like it was a voice function on an app, and it was, hey, what if we allowed you to speak to this and it would do XYZ, right? And hearing the superintendents just go, no, no, I wouldn't use that. No, because it's noisy out on site.
Yeah.
It's loud.
Hmm.
Now, okay, there's some argument there that could be made on the tech side. Maybe there are some microphones and different things like that that could actually overcome that. Maybe the superintendents weren't, but I think it was a confidence thing. It's if I can't hear myself
Hmm.
talking, talking to this thing, there's like a level of almost assurance that they need, right? They need to be
Hmm.
reassured that they said the right thing or that it made sense. Because I mean, if you're trying to speak over having earplugs in, that can be a little bit weird, right? And so there's
Yeah.
just these little instances where it was a young startup, they had assumptions, and we did some
Hmm.
interviews with some professionals, and it broke their assumptions, and it was kind of kind of fun to watch, and that's part of exploration, right? It's part of trying to find your focus, which is you come in with a hypothesis and man, you got to
Yeah.
beat the snot out of it and hope for the best. I'm hoping that stands the test of time, but you can't lead people to it. You have to leave it open.
For sure. I know I'm guilty of this where sometimes you kind of feel you understand the problem and you jump to a solution, but really you got to kind of give the problem some space and like, what's the problem? What's the problems around the problem? Is this the right problem? And it's as contractors and guys and whatever, we want to fix it, right? There's a problem, we fix it, right?
Yeah.
But realizing that sometimes you need to like kind of get some better understanding to make sure you're fixing the right thing or actually building a solution that's going to work, which is what you pointed out there.
So guilty of this too. I'll
Yeah.
I'll call myself out here, Derek. I am so guilty of just assuming that I understand the problem and I just start talking. And I had to have a couple people call me out and be like, listen, you need to listen better. And I'm coming from this from a standpoint of being just an absolute yapper. Like you put me in a room by myself, I'll be completely
Mhm.
entertained. I can have conversations with myself all day. Because I'll just start yapping about stuff. And I've really had to get better at that over time, which is listen, the gold comes from listening. It doesn't come through talking, right? And there's a lot of wisdom and that is old wisdom that has been passed down from
Mhm.
generation to generation, but it's easy to forget. And especially you started a podcast 6 years ago, right? And I literally trained myself to just keep talking and just keep talking and keep talking. And
Yeah.
you get really good at that you
Mhm.
just forget to shut up and listen. And I think that's like at
Yeah.
the core, it's like if I could give a
Mhm.
founder any advice, it's,
Mhm.
just be slow, slow, slow to talk and very quick to
Mhm.
listen.
Yeah.
And I know I'm guilty of that. So just take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, great advice. So with any business, but especially tech, churn is a huge deal. Can you talk about how you kind of plan, I guess, to reduce churn or what a business can do in order to kind of provide long-term value and continue to service or
Yeah.
provide products to a client for the long term?
So I think I spoke to a couple people about a month ago, and
Mhm.
they were expressing a concern around churn. It was really
Yeah.
interesting because their close rate was super high. Like they were
Mhm.
closing deals left and right. That is
Yeah.
because they're excellent at marketing, excellent, very professional at that. Amazing at marketing. They're amazing at branding. They're amazing at their messaging and everything. Man, they would get people through the door. They would sell them on this vision that they had
Mhm.
for a product, and they would
Yeah.
buy.
Mhm.
Like their close rate was like above 50%. They were killing. But they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, but we're worried, like really worried about our churn. You start
Mhm.
digging into the issues here and you realize that the vision of the product was really feel good, right? It felt good on paper.
Mhm.
But then you start digging in a little bit deeper and you realize, yes, but what is the return on that investment for the person that purchased it? And what is the return on investment for that person's employees who will be forced to use it?
Mhm.
What is
Yeah.
that ROI for them? And the answer was, we don't know.
Mhm.
Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But again, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. It's a feel good story. And so I think that can contribute to churn. It's that you can sell like really well, like these guys, but you can still have a
Mhm.
churn problem in the back. At the end of the day, the thing that reduces churn is consistently talking to your clients about what they need, right? So that's number one. But beyond that, having a better sense of how do they make more money as a result of doing business with us and
Mhm.
using our technology? Because if
Yeah.
you can't answer, here is how much money I am saving you by you implementing this system, or here is what I am preventing a massive expenditure because of a safety thing. I have a friend who he does VR training for concrete truck drivers to
Mhm.
prevent the truck from turning over. Like when they're in a turn, when it's full, it's very top
Yeah.
heavy. And if you take a corner too fast, it can
Mhm.
flip and massive insurance risk in that. I think he quoted me up to it was a $500,000 to $1 million or more of spend that could potentially come from one of those incidents. And so he was able to go in and say, listen, I'll train your guys for $5,000 and
Mhm.
you could prevent maybe $1 million worth of risk. And
Yeah.
so that to them is like, okay, $1 million and $5,000, that's a drop in the bucket on what
Mhm.
I could
Yeah.
spend. So I'm gonna take some prevention or take some preventative measures here to keep that
Hmm.
from happening. And so a lot of times though, and that's kind of a one-off case, but a lot of
Yeah.
times back to, that other group that I was talking about with their product who sold like crazy, they're great at marketing. But man, when it gets down to that thing functioning and stuff, actually, you know what? It actually functions really well. It looks really pretty,
Hmm.
but there's really no value that people are getting out of it other than feel good. And so, man, you got to dig beyond just the it has to be this like really holistic picture overall. Like it has to be marketed well, it has to look really good, it has to bring ROI. It has to have an ROI for the
Yeah.
buyer. And if you're not getting those elements in place, well, actually, you know what? I'm gonna pull that back a little bit. If you provide ROI, even if it doesn't look good, even if you don't market it well, you're still going to win.
Hmm.
If you show that you have a return on the investment, that people, when they
Yeah.
buy you, that you will give them money back as a result of XYZ. I've seen really crummy looking products do really
Yeah.
well because they had their fingers on the pulse of the
Hmm.
needs. But the companies that really kill it are the ones that can do all three of those. They can
Yeah.
market it well, they can brand and talk about it clearly, and they do deliver an ROI. And
Yeah.
those three rarely come together. I think those are probably the biggest companies that are out there that can do that really well.
Yeah. They've got that whole engine working for
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
from top to bottom.
When it takes
But
time.
as far as yeah, as far as churn goes, like I think as you become more experienced or mature in as an entrepreneur, you start to realize that like obviously the branding marketing super incredibly important in sales, but ultimately that's just going to be a hamster wheel unless you actually have a good product that people are going to use long term and are going to
Mhm.
come back to buy from you again and again, right? Because then you're kind of throwing all that marketing and sales and energy kind of out the window if they just purchase once and then they're never going to talk to you again.
Yeah. So I'll throw this in there. Their
Mhm.
solution at the moment of speaking to them was we need more sales.
Yeah.
They saw
Hmm.
churn and they said, we need more sales.
Yeah.
We need to get more people through the door. Pause. Pause. Why are you not keeping the ones that you have? That
Hmm.
needs to be the bigger question.
Yeah.
Why? Man, and it stinks too because you can get caught up in that vanity metric of like, oh yeah, we had like 50 leads come through the door and we closed like all 50 of them. It feels
Yeah.
really good, but okay, great,
Hmm.
but we had 100 of them churn out last week, right? Like
Yeah.
we're going backwards. What's happening? So
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
can really accelerate your growth by just not just focusing in on the sales, but servicing the clients that you already have and making sure that you're delivering value for them. I'm going to use the word, that was the game changer for me, which was stop just trying to sell the next thing, focus on the one that you have and
Yeah.
make that word of mouth spread by doing
Mhm.
good work. Same thing in service businesses as it is for software, hardware businesses, technology businesses. Do good work for the few that you have, and they will
Mhm.
carry you to the next ones, and they
Yeah,
will
for
propel you
sure.
forward.
Right on. Super important concept there for sure of recognizing the churn kind of ratio and how important that is for a business. Now, I've seen a lot of new startups. They're coming more and more prevalent, I think, with especially on the software side, but product side as well. Seems, there's so many little niches and products coming out and softwares, and I'm in the space, so I see a lot of them. How would you approach someone who's like they're fed up, maybe they're a contractor or in the industry, they found a problem bothered them for a long time. They're like, I want to build some product for this or software. How do you suggest they get started in that process and get into the space?
Don't tell people, ask people. Don't tell
Mm.
people what the problem is. I think, especially if you're coming out of the industry, you think you know the problem, which, hey, you probably do. I'll give you that credit. You probably do know what the problem is, but
Yeah.
you need to. This is an insurance policy, this rule, which is
Yeah.
I'm not going to come and try to sell you on this idea, but I am going to ask you questions to make sure it's also a problem for you. So if I'm building a software solution for me because
Yeah.
I have this problem,
Mhm.
here's the deal. I need to make sure that it's also happening for other people, not just me in my
Yeah.
one company, right?
Mm.
Because there's a lot of variance out there. So you need to put your ego at the door and you need to
Yeah.
say, listen, I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna ask Jim Bob over here. I'm gonna go ask Tina over there, what is
Mhm.
your experience with X? How often does that happen? Make sure that you get the data points that it's happening for them too. So, what I'd say as well to learn how to do that, I would recommend that mom test book that I mentioned.
Mhm.
So look up the mom test as like a great product resource of like, here's how we need to think about our products and how we're setting them up foundationally for success. Second to that, for like go to market and how you're going to focus is Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore. If you can do those two things, you're going to be setting yourself up for really a really solid path forward, I'll say. And
Yep.
90% of the technology founders out there, they overlook kind of those core things. They think they understand. And I'll kind of pick on the contractor a bit.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times, let's say a kid comes out of school, wants to build a construction technology solution. They're curious. They're going to ask the questions. And
Yep.
they're actually a little less prone to assuming than the construction person who knows everything.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so I think there's a bit of, I gotta say, I kind of got pushback on this idea for a while. I was like, oh no, it needs to be the people that are coming from construction. Like there's benefit to that, but
Mhm.
there's ego that comes with coming out of construction too, thinking that you know the solution to everything. And I had to combat this as well. It's okay, great. You have that understanding of how the industry works. That is a massive weapon in the arsenal, but that can also be your biggest reason for a flop is because you
Yep.
think you know everything. You don't.
Definitely.
You need
Yep.
to ask.
Yeah. One of the hardest things is getting rid of your ego, and sometimes an apprentice's mind, is best suited sometimes to a very straightforward way without all the, past experience or the hard-headed. I have been in the industry for 30 years and I know how everything works, right?
Yeah.
So so very true. Perfect. Thanks so much, Tyler, for coming on. For everybody out there that wants to connect with you, we'll put the website for FieldProof in the description of this, video, audio, wherever you're watching or listening. Go check out the website. How should people reach out if they want to connect with you or learn more about the work that you do with FieldProof?
Yeah, so you can go to fieldproof.io initially and go check that out. We're focused right now because focus is everything, is we're focusing on companies that are overseas that are
Mhm.
looking to come to the US. They're looking to bring
Perfect.
their product to the US market. But outside of that, if you just want to reach out for a coffee chat, have a yap together, you can look me up on LinkedIn, Tyler
Yep.
Campbell over there. I'm the dude in a hard hat. Pretty
Yep.
easy to spot. So
Perfect. Yeah, I'll put the link to the description. Definitely check out FieldProof. Reach out to Tyler here if you're interested in learning more. And thanks so much, Tyler, for coming on. You've been a wealth of knowledge and experience and insight. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on today.
thanks so much, Derek.